Blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome, everyone, to the 75th episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. I am your tech tour guide for this evening, Greg Greenlee. We are Blacks in Technology. If this is your first time listening, you can find us at the following URLs. We are at www.blacksintechnology.net. You can catch us on the Twitters. Follow us at Black in Technology, and that's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We also have a Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. You can check us out on LinkedIn. There's a group, and that's under Blacks in Technology as well. So if you are on Twitter right now, and if you have questions for our guests, tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk, BITTECHTALK. Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology. We are always focused on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. So if you want to partner with us, send us an email to partnerships@blacksintechnology.net. Any general inquiries, you can send them to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. And if you want to sponsor one of these incredible podcasts and get your company or your organization in front of the faces of millions of people, I'm just kidding, thousands, send us a email to sponsorship@blacksintechnology.net. A couple of announcements to make before we get started. Blacks in Technology, we have partnered with Self Conference. I've said this over the past few podcasts. That's actually going on next week in Detroit, Michigan, Motor City Casino, May 29th and 30th. And we are having a meetup there at the Self Conference Friday night from 6 to 8. So hopefully you can join us there. You don't have to attend the self-conference in order to attend the meetup, so you can just join us for the meetup if you'd like. There is an Eventbrite page. You can check our website out to get that information. So self-conference is a mix of fantastic tech presentation and insightful tech talks in fabulous downtown Detroit. They're filling 2 whole days at the end of May with mobile, web, hardware, software, process, and team talks to help you expand your knowledge, meet other technically minded folk, and immerse yourself in Detroit's tech renaissance. So hopefully you can join us. That's next week, May 29th and 30th. Our meetup is May 29th, which is a Friday from 6 to 8. The information on the room that it's being held in is on our Eventbrite page. Check our website out, blacksintechnology.net, to get that information. Also, Blacks in Technology, we're an outreach partner for the Registry Bay Area 40 Under 40 Tech Diversity Silicon Valley campaign. That deadline for nominations has been extended to Tuesday, May 26th. So if you want to go check that out and nominate someone, that's the registrybayarea.com. So what this campaign is the 40 Under 40 Tech Diversity is a regional recognition of the outstanding achievements of 40 leaders from underrepresented communities of color under the age of 40 who are standouts in their field of technology as engineers, technologists, diversity and inclusion officers, executives, entrepreneurs, or VCs. Nominees will be evaluated on their professional achievements and influence within their industries. Board affiliation, civic engagement, and other leadership roles will also be taken into consideration. So the deadline, once again, has been extended to May 26th. So if you want to nominate someone, check out their website and nominate. So tonight we have Tiffani Ashley Bell as our guest. And we were just actually talking, and it's kind of funny how this kind of happened because she was on our show 3 years ago, and I looked December 10th, and she was actually podcast number 25, and this is podcast number 75. So 3 times 20, the numbers worked out, people. This is what I'm trying to say. I don't know how, it just fell in our favor, and she's back once again. And we're going to get into what she's been up to. So Tiffani Ashley Bell is co-founder and executive director of the Detroit Water Project. And she's also a back-end developer working primarily in Ruby on Rails and iOS. Tiffani holds a BS in computer science from Howard University, and we want to welcome her back. Tiffani, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Greg. And congratulations on 75 episodes now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it's pretty amazing. I need to find out something to do for like the 100th episode. That's just like, Paramount, and I got to do something. I don't know what it is, but maybe I'll.
Maybe you could do a show, like a physical show, so we can see you on stage somewhere, maybe.
Ooh, good idea. And maybe I can have Ayori. Right. Maybe I can have Ayori back on the show to co-host with me, because she was co-hosting with me for a while, and then she got real busy, and but I liked having her. She came up with very, very good questions, and I always come up with my questions are lame. I'll be honest, but she comes up with great questions. They're always really, really, I don't know, insightful, and I'm just in awe every time she helps me out with questions, or she writes questions. It's like, wow, how do you come up with this stuff? So maybe I can convince her to come back and do episode 100 with me. So, Tiffani, how have you been? What's been going on in your life?
Yeah, I've been great. So, I just finished the winter 2015 class of Y Combinator, being one of 3 nonprofits in there for Detroit Water Project. And that has been my life since the end of my Code for America Fellowship that I just finished back in November. And during that Code for America Fellowship, I worked on procurement for Atlanta, and we launched a new procurement website for the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And that's at procurement.atlantagA.gov. And that's been my life thus far.
Wow. And you migrated from, where were you? North Carolina, right?
Yes, North Carolina.
And now you reside in San Francisco?
Actually, I live in Oakland.
Oh, in Oakland. I'm sorry. Excellent. Even better.
Totally. Completely.
Excellent. So for people who haven't listened to episode 25, if you haven't, you need to go check it out after this podcast, of course. But give us a little bit about your background and how you got started in technology, how you got started in coding.
Okay, so me starting as a developer was completely accidental. I was 6 years old. My mom bought me this thing called a Pre-Computer 1000 from VTech, and it came with a few built-in games, and I got tired of those, and so I ended up flipping to the instruction manual. In the back of the manual, there was instructions on how to learn BASIC, which is a programming language, and I just ended up following that tutorial and building my own games, and I was 6 at that point. But I actually wanted to be a cartoonist, and so I didn't really know what I was doing or stick with it at that point. But when I got older, probably around middle school, I picked up some books on how to put together web pages, and I just kind of continued programming and doing stuff like that from there. And then ended up in 10th grade, I took a programming class, but at the same time I turned 15, and my uncle, who I'm having dinner with tonight actually, almost exactly 15 years later, I'll be 30 on June 25th, by the way, he bought me this programming book, Teach Yourself Java in 21 Days, and I worked through that, and that was my 15th birthday present from him. And so, and I ended up finishing high school, getting a full ride scholarship to Howard University to study computer science, and took it from there. Had the internships at HP and IBM, 2 summers at HP, 1 summer at IBM, and that's been my trajectory thus far, just as far as how did I get into tech, basically.
That's pretty incredible. You say it was, I guess, is that really an accident? That's kind of, you're really you got started with your first, did you say a VTech? Is that the little, because I know they have VTechs now, but they're more I guess they're more toys now.
Yeah. They are. They had toys back then, but they had some models that were pretty maybe it was for a middle school student or something. And my mom, just happened to buy it because that's what she picked up. But yeah. They seem to have changed as a company, as a matter of fact. You're right. They have different models nowadays. I haven't seen anything similar, but I wish they did make something just like that, because, like, it was a great thing for me to have at that age, completely.
Right, right. So you're really a self-starter, it sounds like. It sounds like, you know, you started at 6 and you looked in the back of the book and you were just like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then your uncle got you the Java book and you worked through that on your own. So you really are, you know, self-motivated, self-starter. Is that kind of, you know, spill over into you being an entrepreneur?
I think so. I mean, I just always am more like, you know, I'm interested in something, so let's go and get resources to expand my knowledge on it. Like, my mom actually used to take my brother and I to the library all the time as kids. And because she would always have magazines around the house, and I wouldn't read those. I want, like, other books. And so she would take me and my brother to the library every other week or so, and we would just get, like, you know, different books. My brother would get, like, just, you know, because he's 5 years younger than I was, and I was in, like, middle school at the time, so he would get, like, kids books and stuff like that. But I would get, like, programming books and, like, science fiction, Isaac Asimov, stuff like that. And I would just read that sort of stuff. I'm like, yeah, and just teach myself these things because the knowledge was there, basically.
Nice. And you come from an HBCU, Howard University. So what's the atmosphere? Right. What's the atmosphere there like in regards to computer science and STEM in general? Because I visited their website recently, and right there on the home page is, you know, something about STEM. So what's the atmosphere there like in regards to their computer science program?
Yeah, the computer science program at Howard is great. So I just actually, it's ironic you asked this. I had dinner with our department chair, Dr. Burge, in San Francisco a few weeks ago. And we were just talking more about, like, how the department wants to get more into pushing students to do more startup-driven type things, taking classes where we talk about, like, entrepreneurship. We talk about, you know, running a startup and how to just build, like, minimum viable products, for example. And so the department is shifting toward those things. Like, we still have people that are very career-driven, want to do the usual routes to, like, Microsoft and Google, investment banks and stuff like that. But the department, you know, and ever since I was there, like, I graduated actually in 2008, and Dr. Burge back then was making this shift toward, you know, how can we engage students like myself and other classmates I had that were interested in entrepreneurship, because we had these skills and, you know, we weren't interested in going to career fairs and, like, having a safe job and things like that, because we figured that we're interested in other things. And so the department is trying to shift in that direction.
Right. Nice. And is that kind of what other, you know, other schools are doing? Schools like Stanford, schools like MIT, are they kind of, do they do that same thing? Do they kind of focus on more like, hey, you know, not the career path, but more of the entrepreneurial path?
Yes, totally with Stanford. I mean, Stanford has been, like, the exemplar of what happens when you push your students to become entrepreneurs, the people that show up to hire at career fairs rather than the people that show up to leave their resumes at career fairs. They've been the exemplar of that. It's something I really admired totally about the department at Stanford. I'm not really familiar with MIT as far as how they are as entrepreneurs. I know that the founder of Bose finished at MIT, but that's, like, you know, been a while ago. But again, yes, Stanford's been the exemplar of that, and I think that Howard is going in that direction as far as the computer science department. Like, we have an entrepreneurship program at Howard, actually. And again, all that stuff is trickling down to the engineering building, so I can see that coming.
So I know you probably had your share of kind of your bumps in the road when it comes to, you know, comp sci and how it's being taught. Do you feel like there's a need to, and I've had discussions with people within the Black technology community on, you know, teaching computer science and it needing to be changed in order to get more people of color involved in STEM. What's your feelings about that? What do you think needs to be changed, or do you think there needs to be anything changed?
Well, I know personally from friends of mine that were originally computer science majors at Howard, for example, that, I think it's different for some people. They need, like, a way to point to what their purpose in computer science is going to be. They're not content to just, like, tinker and just build random things. Like, they want a purpose behind what they're doing. And I think that if we talk about, like, especially with the Detroit Water Project, for example, like, I like to build useful things. And I think if computer science education is taught in the sense where people can see the purpose of taking a statistics class, for example, they'll be more inclined to, like, go in that direction. People can see the applications of what they're doing. They'll be more inclined and more, like, interested in what the coursework actually is and actually getting into it, because they can see, like, if I take this calculus class, this physics class, this stats class, and this data structures class, I can go and put together something like Google. But I think that a lot of, like, comp sci education, sometimes it seems like it leaves out those application pieces. It doesn't point to the greater picture as far as, like, what all this stuff can do if you learn it all and you learn it all thoroughly. So I think that's one shift that could be made, pointing more people toward, if you learn this, you can build Facebook. If you learn this, you can build Google. If you learn this is what Amazon is built upon, stuff like that.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see something like that as well. And I think, with some of the organizations that are out there now, I think that's, they're pointing kids towards that direction. Organizations like Black Girls Code, All-Star Code, Hidden Genes Project, it's not just about, learning syntax. It's about, hey, we're going to build something, and this is what you can do with the technology and with the program. And I think it clicks a lot more, especially with kids who aren't exposed to that type of stuff all the time, and, especially inner city kids. Exactly.
If they see that they can, like, make change in their own communities, and then something applies to them,
right,
it's totally fine to get into it. You just have to take the time to find out what they're interested in and, like, how that can help them learn what you're trying to teach them. And that's for any ages, whether we're talking about kids or adults or whoever.
Right. So, according to your bio, you're a back-end developer, mainly Ruby on Rails. Explain to our audience what a back-end developer is and what makes a back-end developer so important.
Okay. So we have two things we talk about when we talk about as far as end developments. So we talk about front-end developers, which are usually like the user interface stuff and the things that you can actively, like, see when you're interacting with Facebook or Twitter, for example, especially on the web. When we talk about back-end developers, these are the folks that pretty much, like, build out the pipes that make the application work in the background. Like, I think of, back-end and background, maybe the same things. In my mind, they are. And that's just, like, the underlying structure of the application, the things that you can't see, like, databases and just all the underlying structure under an application that you're not directly interacting with, as far as, like, I'm clicking this button and it does this. But when you click a button and you send, a status update to Facebook, for example, a back-end developer has wired up things in such a way where this gets saved to the database, a log is written, things like that happen, and that's the back-end developer's realm.
And when you just to clarify, when you say wire, you actually mean program, right? It's not an actual wire, people. It's code that's making this stuff happen.
Yes, I'm notorious for using that. I'm actually not a hardware engineer, so I'll probably stop saying that. But it just makes sense to me. I picture these things like, oh, there's wires we're putting together. So yeah, sorry about that.
Oh no, that's no problem. So last I talked to you, you were launching Pencil UN.
Yes.
So what happened with that? What became of Pencil UN?
So Pencil UN was a victim of a couple of things. First of all, I didn't know what I was doing. I'll admit that publicly, and I'll just say that out loud. Like, and it's okay. It was a learning experience.
What? You didn't know what you were doing?
it's one of those things where, like, this is the first startup that I was running where I was actually the CEO, and there were so many things I didn't know. You know, I was trying to essentially raise money to build out and grow a commodity product that didn't have any significant differentiators. I didn't have a team that was there. I didn't have a long-term plan for what was going on, and so it didn't do well. And on top of that, I was running myself into the ground as far as, like, my health, you know, got really terrible and things like that happened. And so it was just, you know, it was a learning experience. I don't think of it as a bad thing, but it doesn't run anymore, put it that way. So that's been put to bed.
But you had to gain a lot of valuable knowledge and experience from running it. So what are some of the things that you took away from that you could say, hey, this is what I learned. I'm now a better entrepreneur because of this.
Right. So I would say there's a few things. First of all, like, if you're going to put together a software project, think about how you can differentiate it and what is like Warren Buffett calls it, what's your moat? Like, what's your moat? What is the thing that's keeping people who can build the same thing from succeeding above and beyond what you can do? And Pencil UN lacks a moat. On top of that, also, just, you know, I was trying to raise money for that. Like, if you've seen the CNN show, Black in America 4, The Promised Land, Silicon Valley, we were out there as part of the New Me Accelerator to raise money. But I didn't have the pitch down. I didn't have those differentiators in there. I didn't have, you know, a plan for how do you get to massive growth. And that's what you need. And that's what investors want when it comes to a funded venture-backed startup. They want to see how will you return, not 10x to us, but how will you return 100x to us? How will you do that? And I didn't have a plan for doing that kind of thing. Whereas now I know, let's, you know, work on that plan. Let's work on that plan for growth. And the plan for growth that supports this product, having a moat, having a, you know, a defensive sort of position that, you know, is completely strong. But also just the value of building a team. I didn't have a team to pencil you in. And that's really something I'll try to do differently with the Detroit Water Project. Having people around me that I can trust who will do X, Y, Z, who will carry through the mission and make stuff work. And that's something I've tried to do very differently with Detroit Water Project. But also just, like, understanding the fundamentals as far as the financials behind running a business. Like, I'm not an MBA. My background is totally technical. But I took the time to take, like, accounting classes and finance classes to make sure that I understood all that stuff going forward so that, you know,
you're saying you took those classes after after the Pencil UN venture?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I took the time to take those classes because I wanted to be an engineer that understood that stuff. Because you can be an engineer and build things, but you can also understand it from the perspective of, you know, if we build this feature, will it bring in X, you know, dollars more in revenue? I can think about things in that way, whereas before I couldn't. And so I was just building things from the perspective of, this is cool to build and that's it. And there was no sort of underlying sort of financial story I could tell around why we're building this thing. Whereas now I can do that. And so, you know, there were so many things that I just learned about, like, plugging weaknesses that I had, whereas now I can say, okay, I can read a balance sheet now. I can talk about, you know, what's going on with the income statements and stuff like that. And that stuff was really important, but I didn't understand that stuff back then. And Pencil UN fundamentally was not a technology product necessarily. It was a sales problem, and I was not a salesperson. And I didn't have that sort of grounding. So I went and took an enterprise sales class at Stanford, for example, and got, you know, just like the fundamentals down at least of, like, how to talk about enterprise sales, how to talk about, like, value proposition and stuff like that, because I wanted to know those things. So that, you know, Pencil UN became a vehicle for me to understand weaknesses that I had and then work on filling those weaknesses so that the next thing that I do will not fail for the same reasons that Pencil UN did.
Wow. And that's, you know, really a testament of, how you are as a person, because some people might have just given up and said, hey, it didn't work out, kind of brushed their hands of it. And instead, you took that extra step, went out there, you learned what you didn't know, put people around you who knew things that you wanted to know, and, and took it from there. That's some pretty good advice. I can tell you right now that I suffer from that. I suffer from I don't know business side of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely know where you're coming from.
It's really fascinating, so it's helpful to learn.
Nice. So tell us about your experience with Code for America. So tell us what is Code for America? What did you do there, and what are some of the great takeaways you can take from your involvement with that?
Okay, so Code for America is an organization that essentially helps cities improve how they use technology to essentially deliver services to citizens better. So I was based with Team Atlanta last year, and we worked on a couple of things, or actually three things. So one of the problems that was really, really serious in Atlanta was how people would get tickets for things like speeding or a broken headlight or whatever else. It's just like traffic violations, basically. And they wouldn't get a court date on the ticket when they got the ticket. And so they'd have to, call numbers and things like that later to figure out when to go to court. But some people just had problems around doing that. And they would forget, and just end up not going to court some kind of way. And they would end up getting another ticket, for example, and get in trouble and get arrested even in some cases because they had a warrant out because they didn't go to court the previous time. And that was a serious problem. And so the team put together a solution to text people when they were supposed to go to court so they wouldn't miss those court dates. And that got really great traction and reception from the city. And so the next thing we did, though, was this infrastructure map where the city of Atlanta had a $1 billion backlog in infrastructure repairs that needed to happen, things like sidewalks and roads and stuff like that. And so what they did is put together a map of where money should be spent in the city. So if you, for example, live in a neighborhood where your neighbor needed better sidewalks because she used a wheelchair, and the sidewalks in your neighborhood were in disrepair with potholes and things like that, and she couldn't get around it easily, you could go to this map and say, we need better sidewalks. Come and spend the budget money here. And so it was pretty much participatory budgeting that we put in place there in Atlanta. And so the next thing, the final thing, was a new procurement website for the city of Atlanta. So at procurement.atlanta.ga.gov, there's a new procurement website. And so you can go there and just see, business opportunities and get notifications around, things that your company might be interested in, and just have a better way of viewing opportunities to do business in the city of Atlanta and opening up procurement, basically.
Very, very nice. It's funny that you mention that, because in our next podcast, we actually have a person who works with an organization called the Sunlight Foundation, and so they work with local policy teams to improve online access to government information. It's along the lines of open data, civic engagement through the use of technology. So it sounds like that's what you were doing for the city of Atlanta.
Yeah, totally, completely.
Excellent. So what were some? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, what were some of your great takeaways from your involvement? What are some of the things that kind of stuck with you in working on that project?
So essentially, we got pretty much unfettered access to City Hall in Atlanta. We got time with the Mayor Kasim Reed. We got time with most of the chiefs of the departments like finance and procurement and courts and stuff like that. And I think one of the things that was really important for me that I ended up doing was just developing empathy for people in government, and the fact that I encountered tons of people who wanted to do a great job, but they may have been hamstrung by lack of resources or hamstrung by, lacking certain know-how to do certain things, to bridge certain gaps between departments, for example. And it was great to see people, be enthusiastic, for example, about putting a new website together. Because essentially it's a WordPress website, but it works better than the site they had previously that was based on a custom CMS that was, implemented before. But this was a user-friendly thing for them that was very similar to Word, which they're used to using. But it was great to see just that enthusiasm that people had, and they got back for their jobs. And this is just to develop that empathy for them and seeing what happens from the other side of City Hall, rather than just being a person that comes in and pays a parking ticket or comes in and pays property taxes. Seeing what it's like for them interacting with the public is just and that informs a lot of my work with the Detroit Water Project, for example. Just understanding that, okay, maybe this is happening because they lack resources. Maybe this is happening because they're not sure of any better approaches than to just turn somebody's water off. But again, I developed that empathy from the fellowship, which was really, really important.
Excellent. That's great. So, how did you all approach projects like that? So, they have a website. It's not working, or I wouldn't say not working, but it's not working in a manner that really helps them. How do you approach a project like that in order to kind of solve the issues that they're having with their current website?
I mean, a lot of it was like having our city partners actually be partners. And so there were two people in City Hall in Atlanta, Matthew and Maisha, that they were great on the mayor's innovation delivery team. And while I was in San Francisco putting together the tech, on some levels they were back at City Hall, talking to the procurement director and telling him, the benefits of if we do this, if we do this, if we do that, if we change our approach to doing, interacting with the public as far as a new website. They were warming them up for the things that I wanted to do. And so, I would come in and tell them and show them different things, but I had my partners that were truly partners for me back in City Hall that were, running interference and helping out in that way. But we had to show them the value first and foremost of what we were doing, and then go from there. And especially with procurement, ensure for them that they were not going to face any sort of difficulties as far as increased lawsuits or challenges to procurements and things like that. We had to make sure that we made sure that people were clear that this was not going to create more work for them, basically, and they could trust the outcome.
Interesting. So how long did that?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish.
I mean, so as far as the fellowship goes, a lot of what we've said, and this is the same for other teams as well, a lot of what we've said is that the fellowship is more about those relationships and those interactions and changing the mindsets and the culture in City Hall rather than the technology. The technology is just the end result as far as the physical thing you can touch. But we also want to inspire that culture change.
Excellent. So how long did that fellowship last?
It was from January to November, with a month spent entirely in our cities in February. It's called the residency.
Wow. Excellent. Great experience, sounds like.
Yeah, totally.
So, and now you are the co-founder and the executive director of the Detroit Water Project. So tell us how this movement came about, why you decided you wanted to tackle this issue.
Okay. So the Detroit Water Project just came from the fact that, one morning I woke up and I read in the Atlantic an article about how over 100,000 people were about to lose water service in Detroit because most of them couldn't pay their bills. But the city, since Detroit's been beset by a lot of financial issues, needed to bring that revenue in, though, because they have all these bonds and things like that, and they have a lot of bond obligations that they have to honor, basically. And so their way of, collecting that money was to turn people's water off. And they were about to do that for 100,000 people. And I just thought that was terrible, frankly. Right. That's the same thing I said, wow. And so Christy Tillman and I, so actually, first of all, I tweeted about what was going on and just asked what were people doing if they didn't have water. So Christy chimed in and just said, if we could give directly to someone, that would be awesome. And I said the same thing, I want to give to an organization, but at the same time, I'm not really sure if it's going to get to these people or not. And so how about we just find a way to give to people directly? And so we set up a site to find people who needed help with their bills because we were going to help them by just going to the website for the utility company and paying the bill on their behalf. And 9,000 people later who also signed up to give paid tons of bills for tons of people. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been totally amazing.
So, how did you get the word out about that?
The same way I found you, through social media.
Really?
Yeah, totally. Just through social media. I mean, we tweeted about what we were doing. It got tons of retweets, and, it ended up being this thing where the press picked it up, and then, for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, it was just, in a lot of news outlets, and people all over the world found out about it, and it went from there.
Oh, wow. That's huge. That is huge.
Totally.
So what's the platform built on? How did you guys design this site?
So the secret, and we talk about minimum viable products, for example. We talk about lean startups and stuff like that. This thing was just the purest example of minimum viable startups you might ever have. So Christy and I, both of us were constrained by having full-time jobs that were very intense and very time-consuming. I was in the middle of my fellowship, and Christy had just started as being a design director at a startup in Boston. And we didn't have time to just overbuild. And so what we essentially did was just put together a bootstrap website using the bootstrap template from Twitter. And I wired up some Google spreadsheet stuff to send, when someone pledged a donation, it would actually get stored in a Google spreadsheet. And we would just use that spreadsheet to pull data and then manually match people. And so there was no back end until probably Christmas.
That's pretty and it's funny that you say that because I run into people all the time who come up, they'll email me or something like that, and they'll say, I'm working on this, can you, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm trying to do this. What advice can you give me? And I'm just like, why don't you start off, instead of trying to do all this at once before you, try to launch it, why don't you just do an MVP and see how that works out before you, go all in with everything. And I was just like, well, we want to have this perfected and this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, need that MVP.
Yeah, that's precisely true. I mean, we didn't have time for that, and I think that was actually a really good thing that happened. We didn't have time to perfect anything, and we still don't. We just had time to build the minimum viable thing that actually worked and got the mission done, basically. And that was just a website with our premise. What were we doing? How does this work? What have we done thus far? How does it work for donors? How does it work for people that actually need the help? And that's all we had time to do. And that was that. Now, it's more sophisticated now because there's been time. I mean, I do this full time, so it's totally more sophisticated now. But I didn't have time previously to build out an entire monolithic Rails app to do this thing for people. And so it worked out that, you don't need just this overcomplicated sort of infrastructure. You don't need caching and things like that to do something very simple and prove a concept. You don't need all that. And it's actually very harmful and wasteful if you do all that. I mean, and that's actually kind of what happened with Pencil UN, technically. I built all this stuff that wasn't needed, that the market didn't want, customers didn't want, and I built it just because I felt like I had to, but there was no sort of validation for why any of that stuff got built. Whereas with this, it was the complete opposite, and it was totally a success. So
the formula works.
Yeah, it works. I mean, it doesn't work for everything. There are some things where you need, like, more sophisticated stuff, but, like,
yeah,
you can start small and go from there and just prove the concept at least with a lot of things.
Right. So how does it work now? How do users, or how do people who want to pledge, how do they go about doing that?
So the site's still, like, I've had a friend of mine, David Leonard, who has redesigned the site. He's another Code for America fellow that helped out last year.
Okay.
But generally the site still works the same. Like, you put in your email address and how much you want to pledge, and you'll be matched instantly with someone that you can actually help in either Baltimore or Detroit. And that's just driven by a Rails app at this point. And it just, goes through the database, finds out who's been approved for help and how much that person might still need help with, and then it'll match you with a person based on what you pledge. But that's all like Rails and stuff now that powers all that.
Excellent. So, and this is more of a philanthropic effort. So do you see yourself becoming more involved with creating these type of solutions, or maybe even a company that kind of specializes in creating these type of solutions? Or was this just a kind of a thing that, that really caught your attention, that you felt real passionate about doing, and so you just went and did it?
I mean, I think there's room to expand this out to other problem domains, at least.
Right.
But as far as creating a company that, like, administers a solution, maybe not. We're still just focused on water at this point. And so, I think that's one thing with Pencil UN too I learned, like, figure out a way to focus. And I think that with the Detroit Water Project, is focusing on this main issue of water and how can we get people squared away as quickly as possible. That served really, really well in this instance. So.
Right. Excellent. So what's so far has been your most fulfilling part of your journey with the Detroit Water Project?
So it's just been the idea of, like, something I built being meaningful and, like, actually being a meaningful part of someone's life that I don't even know. But just the idea that, like, we built this app, this thing that, like, could have just been a total flop, but, like, it actually is saving people's houses from foreclosure because of water bills. It is connecting people who care to people that need to be connected to folks that care and understand and empathize with the situation.
Right.
And it's just doing the stuff that you figure, like, when I was learning the code as a teenager, I didn't figure I would build anything like that. So it's been, like, interesting to see, like, this piece of code is doing this very tangible thing for people on both sides of the table, when we're talking about donors or the folks that we're helping.
Mm-hmm.
That's been really, really powerful for me. And I have to, like, sometimes just sit back and go, wow, this is really, really, really awesome, and I try to stay humble about it, but sometimes it's just like, wow, this is really, really cool, It's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. And this really plays into, the narrative that we were discussing earlier about showing kids, or showing people of color and people within our community what can be done with technology and how it could help benefit the community. And Detroit Water Project is a perfect example of that. So that's an experience and that you can take and share with, I don't know if you talk or if you do talks, or if you talk. Yeah, of course you talk. Talk, let me know. Now, I don't know if you do talks or anything like that, but this is one of those experiences that really can hit home with a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I recently spoke at Black Girls Code, their parent-daughter weekend, on a career panel a couple of weekends ago out in San Francisco. And that was really awesome to do, like, just taking the time out that Saturday and getting up and not sleeping in for once and just, like, going to go talk to these girls about the fact that if you learn this stuff, you can touch on problems that other people can't touch because you're going to see other things that other people can't touch. You're going to see things they can't see. You're going to see problems that they won't see, that they may not. It's not that they'll ignore it. It's just that they won't be affected by it the way that you may be affected by it. And yeah, I do want to do more speaking on stuff like that, especially the groups like Black Girls Code. It's just, I mean, and I love Black Girls Code actually because they were a group I wish I had when I was that age. Totally. And yeah, I would love to tell the story more.
Excellent. So it's funny because I was at work one day and I guess somebody at my job subscribes to Fast Company, and I spotted you in an issue of Fast Company about the Y Combinator. Was that an accelerator or is that what it is? Or an incubator?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, and I totally didn't realize that you were a part of that. I was reading, but the article really didn't go into, it touched on a little bit about the Detroit Water Project, just you being there, but it was kind of talking about, I guess, the person who runs it now. But tell us about that how did you get involved in that, and what was that experience like?
I mean, so we applied, back in October, the applications were due, I think. And I was still in my fellowship at that point. But it's funny because, like, the fellowship ended 2 days after I applied and got in. Real quick,
Tiffani, can you explain, just go over what the Y Combinator, what that even is? Because some people who might not know what Y Combinator is.
Sure. So Y Combinator is the most prestigious startup accelerator and seed fund. I think they call themselves a seed fund, actually. There's been some controversy around that. But, the most prestigious startup accelerator and seed fund in the United States. They have funded companies like Stripe, Dropbox, Airbnb, Zenefits. There's tons of other ones that have been the so-called unicorns in technology as far as being billion-dollar-plus companies. Y Combinator is behind all of those, and it's a 3-month program that is designed to help you raise funding for your idea. And what they do is they focus on growth and distribution, and you spend 3 weeks making sure that you are on a path to grow as a startup. And that's their whole thing, grow, and will help you raise some money after you grow and prove your concept at that point.
Wow. What's the process like of applying, and how was it when you got accepted, and what was the atmosphere like when you got there? Tell us about that whole experience.
Yeah, so you apply. It's a very concise application, and they ask for conciseness from you as well. They don't, the less you write, but the more impact with what you write, the better off chances you have of getting in. Because for this application cycle that Detroit Water Project got into, there were 5,600 applications, I believe. Wow. And 114 companies got in, with 3 of those being nonprofits. And it was super competitive, but part of, optimizing for success is, having some traction if you already have something that's running, but then also just writing your application in such a way where you optimize for the fact that they've already read tons of applications before yours. So write something that stands out and use as few words as possible. Don't get worried, break your paragraphs up, stuff like that. That's kind of how the application process goes. But then, if you're interested, you get a 10-minute interview. And so I had to go down to Mountain View for the 10-minute interview and just talk more about what I was doing and why it was going to be successful and what the game plan was. And, that was an interesting experience because it's a panel interview. It's at least 2 of the YC partners, and I had 4 of the YC partners interviewing. And, it was an interesting 10 minutes. So it worked out well. And so the program, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying, the program itself, when it starts, it's 3 months, week by week you go, and you have things like office hours, like college, basically. And you just talk about, what you need as far as help, like what's your greatest need, basically. And so if that's like figuring out how to grow, they will talk to you about how to grow. If that's figuring out, like how much should be raised, if you're at that point, they'll talk to you about those sorts of things. And it's just addressing all those things that you need to be, to be successful for whatever point you're at. There's startups that come in, and we had a guy in our batch that had already raised $14 million, but he was there for serious money. I actually love his company. It's called Transcriptic, and there's some interesting stuff around just like lab testing and stuff like that. But he'd already raised $14 million versus like other companies coming in that barely had a prototype, but they believe in the team, and so they got in.
Right. Interesting. So does Y Combinator normally accept a lot of nonprofits? Or do you know?
Well, they've just started accepting nonprofits, I believe, in 2013, but the first one being WATSI, which is like you can help pay for medical expenses in another country for a child, for example, who might have a cleft palate or something like that. And that was the first nonprofit they accepted, but they've accepted a few others since then. They're not a huge part of each batch. Like we had 3 in our batch with 114 companies total, and so they're not a huge part of it, but they still want to invest in those just because like they try to take we got the same experience that the for-profit companies did, basically. We sat in on the same dinners around like fundraising and stuff like that. It's just that our outcomes are very different as far as like we won't have shares that we sell. We won't be having $1 billion exit, but instead we measure impact and growth in terms of impact. So
interesting. What are and not that you have to name any. What are the people like there? Like, are they like super driven, or are they more laid back than what you thought? Like, what's the atmosphere like around that?
I think that everybody in the room is super driven. It's just that it's expressed in different ways by different people.
Right.
Like I'm a very driven person, but I occasionally don't look that way. I can just kind of like sit back and relax, but still be, totally like going crazy underneath everything. Whereas there are people that, were visibly like, pounding coffee and like aspirin, trying to get work done. They would come walking 50 miles an hour, trying to get stuff done at dinners or whatever. And so but everybody was cool. Everybody was really, really cool for the most part.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great community of people to be a part of, and that's the value of YC. And I said this like in a sort of tweet storm after I finished, like after we had the last dinner. I talked about how like the value of YC is not entirely the money that you get, because you get nonprofits get $100K, for-profits get $120K, and but you can if you try, you can get that from anywhere if you just kind of scrounge it up a little bit. You may not even need a lot of that money to some degree at the beginning, depending on what you're doing. But, like, the value comes from the people that you're around and just, like, the motivation that you get from those Tuesday dinners and reporting progress and the partners and their enthusiasm for what you're doing and helping you out and things like that. The people were awesome. I mean, I got to meet Paul Graham and sit with him for 30 minutes and brainstorm about, Detroit Water Project, which was really, really awesome. So.
Very nice. So what's next for Tiffani?
So, I mean, continuing to work on Detroit Water Project and expanding it out. I mean, I kind of laugh. We need to rename it, actually, because we're not just working in Detroit anymore. But, yeah, just working on Detroit Water Project and working on, 2 main things with that, bringing it to other cities to ensure that people have access to running water in other cities that are also having similar problems to Detroit and Baltimore. But then longer term, getting some legislation in place to prevent people from experiencing water shutoffs if they have financial hardship. Those are the 2 things that we're really, really focused on right now, and just trying to do whatever we can around those 2 goals, basically. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to, keep myself healthy and motivated and everything else, but that's like laser focus right now.
Nice. Well, Tiffani, I definitely want to thank you for joining us here tonight on the podcast, and wish you much success with Detroit Water Project and anything else that you do in the future. But before we get out of here, why don't you give us your URLs, like how people can get in contact with you, how people can check out Detroit Water Project. What's the URL for that?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to DetroitWaterProject.org or BaltimoreWaterProject.org. If you go to either one, you can just, select which city you want to give to. You can give as little as $5 or as much as, $5,000, whatever you want to give, actually. We've had people give anywhere between, like I said, $5,000 to $5,000 in tribute. It helps someone out. And even if you can't give money, at least spread the word and just raise awareness. Because, a lot of what we're doing is just raising awareness around this issue. Because it's one that people don't know about. We take for granted that we have water. So,
all right.
But again, thanks for having me on the show again, Greg.
Oh, definitely. Is there a do you have a Twitter feed for Detroit Water Project, or is it just the website?
Yes. So it's DET Water Project on Twitter. We couldn't fit the whole thing in, so
I'll include that in the show notes as well. And where people want to follow you on Twitter, how do they follow you?
It's just my first name, Tiffani.
Excellent. Well, Tiffani, once again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we can connect when I come out to San Fran not next week, in 2 weeks. I'll be out there for WWDC, the Big Apple Developers Conference that's going on, June 8th through the 12th. So I'll be there from actually the 6th through the 13th. So hopefully within that span of time, we can get together, I don't know, have lunch, breakfast, or something.
Yeah, totally. Let me know when you're in town.
Definitely. Well, thanks again, and wish you much success in the future, and take care.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
And that's it, everyone, for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. Thanks to all of our listeners who tuned in tonight. Thanks to our guest, Tiffani Ashley Bell. If you like what you heard tonight, you want to let us know, or if you have suggestions or comments, email them to us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net. And join us in 2 weeks from now. Same bit time, same bit channel on June 4th for another exciting episode of the Bit Tech Talk podcast. We will be joined by Levita Tuff to discuss open data and civic engagement through the use of technology. Levita is currently a policy analyst for the Sunlight Foundation at sunlightfoundation.com, where she works with the local policy team to improve online access to government information. Sounds like a fabulous podcast. I think you should be joining us. And that's going to happen again June 4th. So remember, tech yourself before you wreck yourself. Take care and have a good night.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology.